Well, good evening. Good evening. It is 8 p.m. on the 17th of October 2019. Samuel here. Honor and a privilege to share with you again. And thank you very much for your presence and your company. The topic of this evening is relationships and spirituality, or spirituality and relationships. Reason for the recording this evening is a number of things have come up in the last few days along these lines. Relationships and spirituality. And relationships are going through unprecedented challenges because of one or both have embraced the journey home to the truth of who they actually are, which is encapsulated really in the term spirituality. So what I endeavor to do this evening is to endeavor to throw a little light on the subject and share my own personal experience in this particular matter. You know, really what spirituality actually is falling in love with ourselves. And there are a number of things that take place. Many things within ourselves take place in that process, as many of you know, which have an impact not only on ourselves, but on relationships. All relationships, especially partner relationships. And it is challenging, to say the least, sometimes difficult, sometimes very difficult, dramatic and potentially traumatic for certain people to, when they're going through this. So before I get into what I wish to share or what has been laid on my heart, or indeed questions that have been asked in the last few days or points that have come up, let's say hello to everybody. Phyllis, Nadine, Karen, Pauline, Rosemary, how you doing? Sylvia, and Mary, Dion, and Suzanne. Hello there, Dion. I hope you are feeling better. Yeah, okay. Well, honor and a privilege to have your company, an honor and a privilege to do these. Okay, before I get into today, just a couple of announcements. Those of you who are interested in having one-to-ones, please feel free to email me at Samuel, that's info@samueljennings.life, or go to my website, which is samueljennings.life. I would also encourage those of you who have not yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. So simply, if you Google Samuel Jennings on YouTube, I will come up, or I should. Okay, as you know, or some of you know, or maybe some of you don't, because of this personal experiences that I've actually had in relationships and how relationships are impacted significantly by this journey, spiritual journey, I have been through the proverbial. As you know, my own journey started many, many years ago. And sometimes I didn't honestly know myself what was going on. Never mind my partner at the time. And anyway, I'm also very, very, very privileged to met my twin flame 19 years ago. And as those of you who may be aware of either being twins or are aware of the twin flame scenario, the twin flame scenario is the be all and end all of button pushers. Twin flame twin flame connections are not relationships. They are spiritual connections out of this world connections. And what are they designed to do? Twin flame interactions or twin flame connections are designed to assist ourselves in speeding up the process of becoming spiritual beings here on planet Earth, having a human experience. That is the function of the twin flame. So I'm not going to get into too much of that this evening because it's deeply sacred to me. But any of you who wish to have clarification about twin flame scenario or situations, please feel free to contact me. Either message me on here or indeed send me an email, info@samueljennings.life. Matthew Manai has joined us. Hiya, Matthew. Hope you're feeling better, buddy. Great to have you with us. Suzanne, yes, great to have you. All right, so let's get into this information. But before I do so, we're going to do our usual relax. I am within. For those of you who are new, the reason why we do this is that the truth of who we actually are is not in our heads. All the questions and all the problems are in the head, the altered ego, or ego if you wish to call it that. Let's be gentle. By the way, we weren't born with an altered ego. We were born as an I am presence, soul, heart, with a mind and a body, in that order. Well, we were programmed out of our I am presence, soul and heart, and the mind was altered and it became an altered ego. So then our world was turned from being the right way up to being upside down. And so some of us actually felt like round pegs in a square hole world. And that's why it was. Our worlds were turned upside down. But what the spiritual path actually is the world that we were programmed into being turned upside down so it could be turned the right way up, if you know what I mean. And I know those of you who are listening understand that. Okay, relax I am within is bringing us out of the here into here, and it's in conjunction with a breathing exercise. Very simple, but very powerful, literally full of power. Okay, so it's breathing in through the nose, 3 deep breaths, and repeating the words, relax I am within. It's also the modern day version of the biblical line in the 46th Psalm, I think it is, be still and know that I am God. Okay, so let's do this together. In through the nose, repeating the word relax, 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 relax. In through the nose, I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. In through the nose, within, 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 within. Okay. What that exercise does is balances the male and female within ourselves, and balances the head with the heart, balances the ego with the soul, and the me with the I. And for those of you who are new, who have not seen the I am diagram, there it is. Okay, so the I am diagram, I am within, here. See here, this is the I am within. And that's why we do this exercise. And that's why I keep saying it and will continue to do so until people actually live, or we return to the truth of who we actually are and get out of the head and live from the inside out. So the I am, soul, heart, mind, and body, in that order. This is how we're born, and the spiritual journey is returning back to that. So just a very quick recap. We covered this a lot in recent videos. What actually happened by age 20, we were programmed or educated out of, or indoctrinated out of this here into this. What is this? This is that the perception of the human in the world that we've been programmed into is that the human is a body with a mind. That's shadow. literally a shell of the truth of who we actually are. So this, I deliberately went into that in a little bit of detail again. Why? Because that's what spirituality is all about. Spirituality is literally remembering this. I'll just bring it a little closer. The pink shaded area is the spiritual being, and the yellow shaded area is the human experience. In other words, the spiritual being is running the human experience. And that's really spirituality in a nutshell, where the spiritual being has taken over the human, the I am presence, the soul and the heart, from the inside is running the outside of our lives. Okay, so what does that really mean? Well, what that really means is that we are following our insightfulness, our intuition, our innate sense of inner knowingness, our inner conscious awareness, and we live from that place. That's where inner peace comes from, and that is where pure unconditional love is. The nature of who you and I actually are is pure unconditional love. And you know, we can shorten that to call it love, because there's no such thing as conditional love. There is only love. So the nature of who you and I actually are is the I am presence, which is the express image of the creator that created us, whose name is love. All right, so let's get into this information this evening. A number of people in the last week or so, probably maybe from the beginning of October, especially the last, from the, if you like, from the new moon to the full moon, which was at the weekend. And in particular at the weekend, the proverbial hit the fan for a number of people, or coming up to the weekend, coming up to that full moon. And especially for those of us who are sensitive. And what do I mean by that? Well, those of us who are spiritually inclined, those of us who have open hearts, those of us who are sensitive, frankly, are more sensitive to what goes on around the new moon and the full moon. So if there are certain things that, excuse me, are going on in our lives, they tend to be more pronounced in and around the new moon or full moon, especially full moon. So that really means that those of us who are on this journey home to the truth of who we actually are, which is returning back to the spiritual being, and the spiritual being then taking over the running of the mind and the body, in other words, taking over the running of our lives. That's called the ascension process. So one of the things I wanted to clarify this evening is a question come up in the last week or so about awakening. What is awakening? Well, awakening is really another term for remembering. We are being awakened out of the slumber through the nightmare experiences that bring us into a remembering or a remembrance of who we actually are and what we are, and then why we're here. So a question was asked recently, in fact, in the last few days, about what's the purpose of the Awakening Academy. And Matthew and I set up the Awakening Academy not to awaken people. That is not our role. Our role is to assist people in the process of their awakening. There's a significant difference there. The waking up of us all is done by Source. The waking up of us all is not an individual, somebody else's responsibility. The waking up of us all is our own responsibility, the ability to respond or not. So what brings about the wherewithal for us to awaken? are situations and circumstances brought into our lives, normally breakdowns. So what the breakdowns actually are blessings in disguise. But when we're in the middle of them, and some, the term dark night of the soul has been used, and quite frankly, I'm not too keen on that term, because it's not the dark night of the soul. It's great news for the soul. It's the dark night of the ego. Because the last thing the ego actually, you see, what actually took place when we were programmed, and another word for programmed is altered. When we were programmed out of the truth of who we truly actually are and what we are, we became altered. What did that mean? Well, the altered aspect is this, that we disconnected from our I am presence, we disconnected from the soul, and we disconnected from the heart. And for some of us, we actually went into a thing called self-preservation. That's the ego self-preservation. And what does that really mean? Stuck in the left brain of logic and fear and the bottom two chakras. So in other words, our lives were completely taken up with short-term gratification and a false sense of security. So what then took place? Well, that which we are, we attract. So what does that mean? Well, what that actually means is the false sense of security requires somebody else to make the person feel secure about the lack of security that they feel within themselves. So they attract somebody else to effectively try to fill the void. And we talked about this in the last relationships video. Remember the two glasses where we had a glass half full and a glass half empty? What's the difference? Well, a half full glass is someone who has an inner conscious awareness that they're not full, they're not complete, but they desire to be so. A half empty is a half empty mindset. It's like a scarcity mentality, speed and greed mentality. Maybe not too keen on changing, would maybe rather continue to draw energy from others than get back in touch with the source of their own energy. There's another term for it, narcissist. Those of us who are sensitive have been empaths. Now, being excessively empathic, what that actually means is that we're loving others more than ourselves. And what does that mean? Well, what that actually means is we give more than we're actually receiving. And what eventually does that mean? It means we feel drained. Eventually nothing left. So empaths, learning to love ourselves with pure unconditional love is learning the balance of loving others with ourselves. And that's the spiritual practice. The spiritual practice is learning the balance of the love of another and others with the love of ourselves. How can I, or how can you, how can any of us love another, esteem another, respect another, etc., until we love ourselves, esteem ourselves, nurture ourselves, respect ourselves? We can't. So what the universe does, the universe allows the altered ego to go off on its merry way until it's not so merry. It becomes very painful, full of pain, and fearful, full of fear relationships. So that which we are vibrating at, and here's maybe a harsh truth, whether we realize it or not, every relationship that we currently have or ever had has been an opportunity to learn about the other person. No, an opportunity to learn about the person in the mirror. That's the primary reason, if not the only reason, for all relationships. All right, so effectively, what does that mean then? You know this term, the other half? Well, let me ask a real straight question. Who watching this, either live or in due course, wants to be that? I'm not searching for a half. I'm not looking for a half, because I am not a half. You are not a half. The truth of who you and I actually are, and 7 billion souls on this planet, the truth of who they actually are is that they're a whole being, but they have been programmed out of, altered into another half mentality. In actual fact, it's not a half at all. It's a mere shadow of the former self, a mere shadow. It's a shell, an empty shell. That's why we felt empty, and that's why we were catapulted in the breakdowns, the nightmare experiences that caused us to, I was going to use expletives there, wake up calls. That's what they are. Breakdowns and nightmare experiences are wake-up calls to bring us into that stage of awakening. So do you understand now what I mean by clarification of the Awakening Academy? The Awakening Academy is to assist people in their awakening. But the universe, source, whatever you want to call it, in conjunction with our own I am soul, I am presence, soul and heart, which has been tapping away at us and our spiritual team, our spirit guides, our guardian angel. Sometimes I often wonder, well, the guardian angel has some patience, isn't he? And what about our spiritual team? Not even in this life, but look at all the lives that perhaps we've been through to get us to this one. Patience? Yeah. Not a lifetime of patience, maybe umpteen lifetimes to bring us to this place. But let's be respectful to ourselves and each other here, which of course what love is. And accept that where we are now is where we are meant to be, and to be responsible. Now, you know how I love to play on words. Responsible is literally being responsible. But how are we able to respond until we uncover that which allows us to respond, or we begin to listen to that inner voice, and then we start responding to it? So then we become able to respond. So the awakening stage, and I'm going to hold this up again: amnesia, breakdown, awakening, breakthrough, and enlightenment. I'll go over it again. Amnesia, breakdown, awakening, breakthrough, and enlightenment. Very quickly. Amnesia is the altered. We were altered so much that we forgot who we are, what we are, and why we're here. But that happened through education, indoctrination, and the programming. So the program, by age 20 or so, sufficiently altered us into such a state of amnesia that we completely forgot. It lulled us into this absolute false, I call it the false ID entity, left brain, false ID entity, a fearful state of unconsciousness. Then we became a puppet on either our own altered ego string, and that's bad enough, but also then a puppet perhaps maybe on somebody else's string. And if that wasn't bad enough, then a puppet on the system string, in other words, the world's strings. So whose tune were we dancing to? Well, we were dancing to somebody and something else's tune, not our own tune. That's why we never felt harmony. We felt something doesn't feel right here. Something, yeah. It was like, singing out of tune, playing out of tune. Absolutely. How could there be harmony when the I am within the soul and the heart was disconnected and the altered ego was running amok? And then the body eventually began to either seek for gratification in sex, drugs, alcohol, whatever. Mine was workaholic. and a fitnessaholic. Doesn't matter what the addiction actually was. It's all the same. It's a cry for feeling unfulfilled. So eventually that leads us to the breakdown, and then we arrive into that place of awakening. All right, an awakening actually there's like two sub-stages of awakening. Number one is I don't know who I am. I don't know what I am, but I sure am not what I am living. It just doesn't feel right. I don't know who I am. I don't know what I am. And we start to ask the questions. What's it all about? There has to be more to life than this. That's really what happens then. We start searching for answers. And we search in alternative medicine. We search in alternative therapies. We search actually in personal growth and development. We search in maybe religion. We search here, there, and everywhere. And eventually, after a period of time searching, of course, the books and the courses and the seminars and whatever else, eventually, after a period of time searching, we discover a thing called meditation, or we get an aha moment. And the aha moment actually is that which I'm searching for is not out there at all. That which I'm searching for is within ourselves. And that's what happened with yours truly 21 years ago, whenever I was given the relax, I am within, 21 years ago. But you know, my search had actually started as early as age 14, which was 21 years previously. I was 35 when I discovered that relax, I am within. But at age 14, I asked could someone please, I asked Source, could someone please show me how to still my mind, how to relax and remember who I am at age 14. So at age 18, I started reading personal growth and development books. At age 21, I went self-employed into my own business. At age 28, I had the first major burnout. And then for the next 7.5, 8 years, I had chronic fatigue, also known as ME. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Did I get into personal growth and development? Absolutely. And in 1993, which was 5 years before I discovered meditation, I did the UPW with Anthony Robbins. Wonderful experience. Absolutely. Wonderful experience. But getting an individual who is dead, disconnected from the source of their own vitality into peak state is impossible. The only way an individual can become into peak state is by rediscovering that which can become peak state, that which is peak state. Well, when it's covered up with layers and layers of indoctrination and programming, how can it get into peak state? The only way we can do that is by feeding that which has been starved. And that's what meditation did for yours truly. All right, so the internal being, the spiritual being, began to get stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, began to fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up and fill up, and eventually the inner self overtook the altered aspect of the ego, and the ego had to come into subjection. Now, what am I getting at? What I'm getting at there is the second stage of the awakening process. It's like two sub-stages. Awakening process, stage 2, if you like, or stage B, is, now I know who I am. Now I know what I am. Now I'm ready to discover why I'm on this planet. And then we go into the breakthrough stage. And the breakthrough stage is, I know who I am, I know what I am, and I know why I'm here. And then our entire lives, then the human aspect of our lives, the doing of our lives becomes an expression of our being. Now, why am I going into this in some detail? Well, here's why. An individual is always an individual. A relationship is not a couple. A relationship is an interaction between two individuals. So let me ask a question here. When we were born, even if we're twins or triplets or quadruplets, still individuals. So let me be very straight. It wouldn't be like me, of course, but let me put it like this. Born as an individual. Now, when we die, do we die as an individual? Yeah. Well, what the heck should we be when we're here during our lifetime? Living in somebody else's pocket or controlling somebody else's pocket? Being controlled or controlling? Being intimidated or intimidating? Being manipulated or manipulating? Being the other half? Being an excessive empath or being a narcissist? No. Being a whole and complete, inner self-reliant and interdependent being as an individual. So what I'm getting at, folks, this relationships and spirituality is an incredibly intriguing and upsetting journey for relationships. Because the vast majority of relationships, if not all, in the world that we've been programmed into, are other half mentality type relationships. In other words, the other person is going to make me feel better about the lack that was within myself. So when an individual gets on the spiritual path, they begin to realize, well, I'm not a half, I want to become whole. So what does that mean? Well, what that actually means is that the attention, if you like, that perhaps one was giving to the other person, or the other person was receiving, and perhaps consciously or unconsciously, dare I say, demanding. So now the time and attention tends to be more inward than outward. So what does that mean? It means our values change. I posted a few things in the last day or two along those lines. Our values being realigned. So our values actually are being realigned from the outward to the inward, which means we spend more time where? Alone, or we want to, because we need to. Let me ask you this. If here is fear and here is love, well, we need to fall out of fear into love. Well, it's not in the other person. Falling in love with somebody else is not possible until we are in love within ourselves. We have a perception of love, but it's a 3D, a third dimensional, non-reality perception based on insecurity, a false sense of security. Okay, so what in effect that actually means is that an individual gets on the spiritual path and they have been in a relationship, maybe even a marriage. What actually happens is that they have to fall in love with themselves. What does that mean? It means they need space to grow. It means they actually need a little bit of time and space alone, or significant time and space alone. Does it mean they separate? No. Does it mean that sometimes they do? Yes. But Eckhart Tolle puts it beautifully when he says if two individuals, and this is the absolute ideal, if two individuals get on the spiritual path together, now normally one will be slightly more advanced than the other. Does that make them better than the other? Not at all. It just means they're slightly further down the road. But an individual actually, so two individuals, now please understand, this is a couple. But there's no such thing as a couple. A couple is two individuals. Let's get our head around that. The couple mentality is the other half mentality. Here's another just coming into my consciousness here, into mine. What happens if people are living in each other's pockets, and one person dies or the other person, one person dies or moves on. And the person who's left behind, their world is devastated. Why is that? Because they weren't living in their own world. They were living in the other person's world. What the other person did or did not do was their happiness or unhappiness. In other words, they were dependent on the other person. What's that called? Dependence on somebody else is called codependence. So codependence is not inner self-reliance. Codependence is depending on the other half. Right. So we get on the spiritual journey. We've been through the breakdown. We come into awakening. I don't know who I actually am. I don't know what I actually am, but I want to find out. That's it. So we begin the search, and the search actually is we spend more time searching, right? And our values get realigned. Now the other person is wondering what's going on because it brings up fear and insecurity in them. Does he or she not like me enough? Does he or she not like me the way they used to? It doesn't seem to love me the way he or she used to. What happened? Is there somebody else? And all these fear-based thoughts come in. Maybe jealousy arises. Low frequency, first and second chakra, left brain, altered ego, fear-based mentality stuff. All right, and none of it's true. All it actually is that the individual has gone on the spiritual journey, which is home to the truth that is within themselves, returning to love, as Marianne Williamson puts it beautifully in her book, Return to Love. Highly recommend the book, by the way. One of the books that I read many years ago. Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. Superb book for relationships and spirituality. I'll put a link to that book at the bottom. All right, so effectively then what that means is that there's sufficient space. They don't separate unless they feel that unless the individual cannot get on with their journey, being in the relationship with the other person that's holding them back, significantly holding them back, so it doesn't allow them to move forward. Here's the other thing that can actually happen. This is what was my experience. I loved another more than I loved myself. And for 12 years, I endeavored to actually get the other person to see and feel what I was seeing and feeling on my spiritual journey. But I wanted it more for them than they wanted it for themselves. You know, that was called control. I was dictating the pace of their awakening or their not awakening. See, the only person that I am responsible for is myself. When we are being responsible to the truth that is within, and the outward aspect of our lives are an expression of the inner truth. As I said in a recent video about the fruits of the Spirit, the fruits that go out from our lives are love, joy, peace, meekness, gentleness, goodness, faith, and all those beautiful things. Really, it can be encapsulated in that phrase, pure unconditional love. In other words, we are loving others anyway, whether they are complying with what we would want them to be and do or not, because what we want them to be and do is none of our blinking business. Now, it took me a long time to get my head around that. My responsibility is to be true to myself, and in so doing, I am true to others. The greatest gift that you or I can give to anybody else is being true to ourselves. That's called self-love. It's also called tough love. It's called respect. It's called esteem. It's called confidence. It's called worth. It's called all of those. But all of those come from self-love. And I don't mean ego self. I mean inner self. Inner self-reliant, inner self-reliant. So the inner self then directs the outer self, and there's no more two selves then. So what has actually happened is that the male and the female of our brain, if you like, or the head and the heart, the logic and the feeling, the ego and the soul, the me and the I have become one self, the true self, the real self. Here's the word, authentic self. Authenticity. Now, what authenticity actually means, it means being sometimes so brutally straight with other people that it can be sometimes misunderstood. But you know, in due course, if and when the awakening process in that individual goes on through to the second stage of the awakening, which is, I know who I am, I know what I am, now I'm ready to discover why I'm on this planet, which is the breakthrough. So when an individual gets there, they will then see why you were being true to yourself. Because they can't see it until they see it. Let me ask you a question. How many times have you tried to have a conversation with someone who's asleep? Is there any point? Or how many times have you actually, that's someone who's in amnesia. How many times have you had to try to have a conversation with someone who's in breakdown? Is there any point? Try it if you like. But when an individual is in breakdown, there's so much stuff going on in their lives, it's very, very difficult for them to actually see, hear, see, and feel with their inner selves, because their inner self is actually still covered up. But here's how we can help someone. And this is the only way I feel we can help someone, is by loving and loving and loving and loving and loving and loving. Love anyway. It's our nature. Our true nature is to love. That is who we are. And what we do is shine light. So a spiritual being is a love and light being. Being, love, and light. An individual, a spiritual being on planet Earth, having a human experience as an individual, not the other half. The other half is old paradigm. The other half, relationships of the past are 3D relationships. The new relationship in the fifth dimensional era that we're moving into is the relationship between ourselves, the relationship between the male and female, the relationship between the head and the heart, the relationship between the me and the I, the relationship between the mind and the soul. Returned to love. A spiritual being on planet Earth having a human experience. That's it. Then our vibrational frequency, once it has shifted to being a love and light being, what are we going to attract? Like attracts like. So, you know, the amazing thing is, we don't need anybody. We certainly don't want anybody. But we love to share the love that is coming from within us. Overflow. The overflow is what goes out to others. Only overflow. What does that actually mean? We do not, and I say do not, facilitate or allow anyone to come along and drop their dirty bucket into our clean well. That's called vampire energy. That's called stealing. We don't and won't allow that. That's called tough love and self-esteem, self-respect. So in so doing, what we actually do by being so true to ourselves, we are inspiring other people to be true to themselves. So when we are true to ourselves, just as Shakespeare said, above all, to thine own self be true. It's exactly what Christ said. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Not more than, not less than. Less than is narcissism. more than is an empath. Love thy neighbor as, meaning equal to. And who is our neighbor? Everyone and everything on this planet and all of creation. But how can we love another? Others, until we fall in love again with ourselves and return to the truth of who we actually are. All right, so got a couple of memes here I want to share with you. Time's going on. Yeah, here we go. Your vibe attracts your tribe. Here's the question. What's the vibe? What we are, we attract. Are we coming from fear? We attract fear. We're coming from love. We attract love. We attract loving situations and people. You've seen it before. I'll hold it up again. The relationship with yourself sets the tone for every other relationship you have. That's it. So if we want to know how to change our relationships, do not expect anybody else to change. We change our frequency and miracles happen. For things to change, I must change. For things to change, you must change. Do not expect anybody else to change. That's called control. When we change, miracles take place. All right, here's another one. As you begin to love yourself, you will find that pain and suffering are only warning signs that you're living against your own truth. As you begin to love yourself, you will find that pain and suffering are warning signs that you're living against your own truth. Exactly. As we begin to love ourselves, if we're having a battle between the altered ego and the true self, if things are painful, well, the universe and our inner selves is trying to get a message through to us. Look at what is causing you pain and deal with it. What do I mean? Be responsible. Yeah, but we cannot respond effectively unless we are very much connected to the source that gives us the power to respond. And you've heard me say many times about this concept of 24/7, which is 24 hours, 7 days a week. I mean, all the time, being connected to the being, connected to our being, connected to the I am within, the soul and the heart, intuition, insightfulness, intention directing our lives. That's being responsible. Another meme here. The more you love yourself, the less nonsense you'll tolerate. Absolutely. And another one, beautiful lady here. I'll read it out because it's a bit shiny. Love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and energy are precious. You get to choose how to use it. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and won't accept. There it is. If anybody wants these, please feel free to ask me and I'd be more than happy to actually send them to you. All right, just finishing off on this, wholesome relationships. Okay, so moving out of the other half mentality type relationships. So if one is not a half and you don't want another half, well, if you want another half, that means one is a half oneself. Well, who wants to be a half? So we talked about that at the very start. Let's be whole. You know, it was on my mind after my meditation this morning about what Christ said to practically everyone who came to him for healing. What did he say? He said, your faith has made you what? Half? No. Whole. W-H-O-L-E. Your faith, which is faith meaning your belief in being worthy to becoming whole, and your faith that source has the wherewithal to provide you with that remembrance how to become whole. That's called worthiness and faith. Your faith has made you whole. So, wholesome Relationships. We've heard of this. Wholesome relationships are not relationships, really. The wholesome relationship is becoming whole within ourselves. I am presence, soul, heart, mind, and body, just as Christ said also. That's it. Wholesome. So then a wholesome connection is what we actually attract into our lives. We have soul brothers, soul sisters, soul mates. And some time ago, I talked about the soul mate. Everybody's looking for their soul mate. You want to know how to find your soul mate? Mate with your own soul first. There's the answer. When we mate, when the ego mates with the soul, the mind mates with the soul, and the me mates with the I, and the head mates with the heart, then we are our own soulmate. When we are ready, let me ask you a question. If we are not ready, wouldn't it be a terrible travesty if we came across the soulmate or the twin flame and we ourselves weren't ready to meet them? Now there's a thought. So, want to meet your soulmate? Want to meet your twin flame? Become whole. Ourselves. This is it. So when we become our own soulmate, then we attract the soulmate. When we become whole and complete, or are in the process thereof, and I mean diligently, daily on the spiritual path, home to the truth of who we actually are, then our vibrational frequency is love and the fruits of the Spirit, and that's what we attract. Would you really want to attract anybody else who is not like that? Or would you, if you or I were in a fearful place, would you really want to impact our own fear on somebody else who is in a loving vibration? So I'm going to pose a real straight question here. Would you want a relationship with you? Would you? Would you want a connection with you? So look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, honestly, ask yourself, would you want to share, or sorry, would you want someone else to share their time, their lives with you? Are you, or are we deserving of them? You know, this term, we used to hear it a lot, maybe still do. Still looking for Mr. Right or Miss Right. Well, what about becoming the right person, the right vibration, in preparation for that right person? Because that's where it begins, folks. For things to change, we must change. Different connections, different vibration. And that's it. So if things haven't been working out so well in our relationships, look at ourselves and ask the question, why? What has the lesson been for me? What has the lesson been in recent times? What has been drawn to our attention that needs looked at? Because I have alluded to it, in actual fact, I didn't allude to it, I made it very clear that we are in the collective awakening, the beginning stages of the collective awakening of humanity. The most exciting time ever to be alive, but it's the most traumatic for many people because their worlds are falling apart. It's called breakdown. But it's the blessing in disguise, because the breakdown will never, ever, ever, ever happen until people are taken out of amnesia. And the awakening will never happen until people are taken out of or go through breakdown. Now, in the next few days, in fact, maybe Sunday, I'm going to talk about the parable of the sower. And the parable of the sower is exactly the spiritual version of what I'm talking about. But I'll give you a quick heads up. Those of you who are gardeners or farmers or from gardening or farming background, would it make any sense to plant perfectly good seed in ground that wasn't made ready for seed? Would it? What I'm getting at is the seed bed. The preparation of the seed bed is the breaking down of the soil. Breakdowns are necessary for people to remember who they are, what they are, and why they're on this planet. So that's why relationships are going through unprecedented times, because they are an expression thereof, or a reflection of what is going on within individuals. Relationships are being turned upside down. Why? Because people were never meant to be living in each other's pockets. They were never meant to be another half. They were meant to be two individuals, or individuals inner self-reliant, interdependent, one on the other, whole and complete overflowing beings, period. Not needing anything from anyone else, but the overflow is what goes out. And you know, for those of us who are very privileged to have the twin flame experience or soulmate experience or desirous thereof, a whole circle, I want you to just visualize this, a whole circle interacting with another whole circle becomes infinity. There you go. And that's it. It's the figure 8 on its side is infinity. A whole circle connects and attracts another whole circle. And that's it. So the new relationships in this era that we're moving into are not relationships. The relationship is the relationship with oneself. Male, female within oneself, head, heart, me with the I, the soul with the mind. That's the relationship. And then when we've got that one sorted and we've become our own soulmate, then we connect and attract others who are focused, they're on their own journey, or they have arrived. I hope that clarifies that. It's certainly been a number of questions that have been asked in the last few days, and it's been on my consciousness to record this to help clarify why relationships are going through unprecedented challenges. They are blessings in disguise. They are the silver lining in the dark cloud experiences to bring us closer to the truth of who we are, what we are, and why we're here. I'm just going to finish off with this. This is something that I noticed recently. Once you know who you really are, being is enough. You feel neither superior to anyone nor inferior to anyone, and you have no need for approval because you have awakened to your own infinite worth. There you go. Once you know who you really are, being is enough. You feel neither superior to anyone nor inferior to anyone, and you have no need for approval because you have, or you've awakened to your own infinite worth. So be it. Thank you for your time. It's been an honor and a privilege to share with you, and thank you for your presence. I love you. I support you. I respect you implicitly. But I want you to nurture yourself. I want you to esteem yourself. I want you to fall in love with yourself. And most of all, to become your own soul's mate. So be it. Thank you. Namaste.